All right, today we're diving into something that really flips traditional therapy on its head. It's called Solution-Focused Brief Therapy, or SFBT for short. And it's all about one big idea: building solutions, not digging through problems.
So let me just kick this off with a question that gets right to the heart of it, and it might sound a little crazy. What if the solution has nothing to do with the problem? I know, it sounds totally backwards, right? But stick with me, because that one counterintuitive idea is the key to this whole thing.
So here's our game plan. We're going to talk about why this is a therapy that, weirdly, doesn't focus on problems. We'll look at the actual tools therapists use, discover the aha moment behind it all, get into the core mindset, and see how it works in the real world.
Okay, first up, a therapy without problems. Yeah, you heard that right. This is the absolute core of SFBT. It's an approach that intentionally, and I mean really intentionally, shifts all the attention to what's already working in your life, even if it feels tiny.
And here's the radical idea that powers it all: the belief that you, the client, already have the seeds of your own solution inside you. So an SFBT therapist is never going to give you advice. Nope. Instead, they use these really strategic questions to help you uncover the answers for yourself. That way, the solution is truly yours.
Okay, so if the therapist isn't giving advice, what exactly are they doing in the room? Well, that brings us right to the practical stuff, the solution-finding toolkit. These are the actual, concrete techniques you'd see in a session.
At the heart of it all are questions, just like these. Take a look. Notice how every single one is pointed toward the future and your strengths. What do you want sets a target? How will you know makes it feel real? And my favorite, what are you doing already? That one starts the hunt for things that are already working.
A lot of sessions even follow this handy framework called MECSTAT. It starts with a bunch of different kinds of questions, like miracle questions and exception questions, to get you thinking differently. But then it has these 3 key actions that are super interesting: the timeout, accolades, and the task.
So first up is the timeout. And no, it's not what you're thinking. You're not in trouble. It's actually a structured pause, usually near the end of the session, where the therapist just takes a moment to reflect on everything you've talked about, kind of putting all the puzzle pieces of your strengths together. Then, right after that little pause, come the accolades. And these aren't just empty good jobs. They're genuine, specific compliments about your efforts, your resilience, what you're managing to do despite the challenges. It's a huge confidence booster. And finally, there's the task. You can think of it like homework, but, and this is the best part, you give it to yourself. Based on everything you just uncovered, you come up with one small, doable thing to try before you meet again. It's all about building that forward momentum. So you might be wondering, where on earth did this completely backwards-sounding approach come from? Well, let's get into the origin story. This is where we find the aha moment behind it all, which is what they call the power of exceptions. This didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It started way back in the 50s, when researchers noticed that sometimes the very things we do to fix a problem just make it worse. Then in the 60s, a therapist named Milton Erickson started playing with future-focused ideas. But the real breakthrough came in the 80s, when Steve DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg discovered that no matter how bad a problem is, there are always times when it's not happening. They called these exceptions. And that discovery led them to this profound realization, summed up perfectly by Steve DeShazer himself. Solutions had more in common with each other than they do with problems. Just think about that. Instead of obsessing over a million different problems, they realized you could just study what works in those few problem-free moments and help people do more of that. This whole idea is really built on a specific way of looking at the world. So let's talk about the SFBT mindset. These are the core beliefs that guide every single question and every single conversation. First, what does SFBT believe about change itself? Well, for starters, you don't need to do an archaeological dig to find the root cause of a problem to solve it. The idea is that change is happening all the time anyway. Your job is just to spot the good stuff and turn up the volume. A tiny change can create a huge ripple effect, and the best way to do that is by focusing on right now and what's next. Now, the beliefs about the client are incredibly empowering.
SFBT says you are the expert on your life. You've already got the strengths you need. You're the one who sets the goals, and you decide when you're done. And get this, if a client seems resistant, that's not seen as a flaw. It's just feedback for the therapist that they need to change their approach. It's a total game changer.
Okay, so we've got the theory, we've got the mindset, but what does this actually look like in a real conversation, especially when things get stuck? Let's dive into our final section and get practical. The whole game is about making a deliberate shift. On one hand, you have problem talk. That's where you dig into the history, the causes, all the nitty-gritty details of what's wrong. SFBT works hard to pull the conversation over to the other side, solution talk, focusing on what you want, what your strengths are, and what's already going well. Of course, there's always the classic roadblock. The therapist points out something positive, and the client hits them with the yes, but, trying to pull the conversation right back into the problem. We've all done it. So how does an SFBT therapist handle that? This is so clever. Instead of arguing, the therapist just agrees with the struggle. They take that but and fold it right into the next question. Something like, wow, given how incredibly difficult things have been, how in the world have you managed to even get out of bed? See what that does? It validates the pain but still points directly to their resilience. It's a subtle but powerful move. Okay, and here's the other big conversation stopper. You ask this great future-focused question, and you just get a flat, I don't know. It can bring everything to a halt. So, what do you do then? You just change the angle, you take the pressure off. The therapist might say, okay, maybe you don't know, but what do you think your best friend might notice? Or your partner? Heck, if your dog could talk, what's a small, good thing they might see? By looking at it through someone else's eyes, the answer suddenly becomes so much easier to find. And all of this really boils down to one critical takeaway. A change is only a change if it's noticed, right? I mean, you could be making small steps forward every single day, but if you don't see them, they might as well not exist. SFBT is all about helping you become a detective of your own success. And that leaves us with a final thought to take with you. You don't have to be in therapy to put this idea to work. So whatever you're working on in your life, I'll leave you with this question. What's one small sign of progress, one tiny exception to the problem that you can be on the lookout for today?